Good morning. Welcome to everyone. My name is Aissatou Maisha Dicko. I'm the head of the World Bank UNHCR Joint Data Center. Let me start by gratefully thanking the government of Côte d'Ivoire for hosting us for this third research conference focused exclusively on the socio-economic research on those forcibly displaced and their hosts. And this is the first one that we're holding in the continent. It's my honor and absolute pleasure to welcome you to Abidjan on behalf of the 4 co-hosts of this conference. The World Bank, our parent institution, the World Bank, UNHCR, the African School of Economics, and the Joint Data Center on Forced Displacement. Some of you have already attended our previous edition of this conference, but a lot has happened since our last research conference, with even greater expansion of quantitative research on forced displacement, and better yet, increased operationalization of this research by policymakers and practitioners. And this is all happening in a context of unprecedented increase of the number of the forcibly displaced, surpassing a devastating 117 million, with over 75% hosted in low and middle income countries. And then if we're looking at the Africa region, over 40% of those forcibly displaced live in the continent. And we have today with us countries that have embarked on this journey using research and evidence to drive inclusive policies. Thank you, Madam Senior Advisor of the Prime Minister of Libya. Thank you, Madam Abdi, also from Somalia, joining us online, and Madam Baikwa from the Central African Republic. But also multilateral development banks, the World Bank, African Development Bank, and then also humanitarian, working closely with countries across the globe to address the binding constraints that are associated with forced displacement. At the Joint Data Center, we really continue priding ourselves in convening platforms like the one today to bring together researchers, policymakers to share and test their latest work, and practitioners to showcase the work and progress they've made to improve the lives of those forcibly displaced and their hosts through strong data-driven research and analysis. We are delighted to have over 1,200 people online registered for this conference on top of all of you that are in this room with us today. With a good mix of academics, senior government representatives, you know, Madame de Mix of Côte d'Ivoire, and then the High Council from the Prime Minister's office in Libya and Somalia. And also international organization and civil society colleagues. I think the sheer size of this figure is inspiring in itself. It shows both commitment to data, facts, and evidence, and an eagerness to learn and to find solutions for those forcibly displaced and their hosts. It's also very promising to see increasingly humanitarian and development actors coming together to provide more integrated solutions to the people affected by forced displacement and their hosts, and also the countries welcoming and embracing this joint approach as forced displacement becomes more protracted. As per the previous edition, we built from 2 main takeaways from our last research conference a little over 2 years ago. First, robust and ambitious research can have direct effect on policy, and more was needed to take these evidence and findings forward and ensure uptake by decision makers and practitioners that we have so many of them in the room today and online. Second, the sub-Saharan Africa region, despite having a large population of forcibly displaced, so about 40% of the global 117 million, you know, and also facing complex and intertwined issues like linked to forced displacement, could benefit from more attention from the research community. So those takeaways has actually guided us to focus on this conference, including selection of the papers and 17 thematic academic sessions that you're going to be seeing over the next 3 days. The 3 panel, mixing policymakers, practitioners, and researchers, and the 2 keynote address by Guy and Anna Maria, and also the choice of the Republic of Côte d'Ivoire for this conference. We look forward to very interactive discussion over the next 3 days, including from people participating online from across the world. To conclude, allow me to say a few words on the selection of the papers. We received over 150 submissions, and in those 21 papers to be presented for the next 3 years, priority was given to those papers that tackle interesting and original research questions while adopting robust and often innovative analytical method. And they all had to be relevant to the improvement of the lives of the 117 million displaced people across the globe. We believe that all of those papers that will be presented in the course of these 3 days satisfies this requirement. With that, let me turn to our distinguished guest that we have today here helping us open the conference, Madame la Ministre Kaba Nialé, Ministre du Plan et du Développement de Côte d'Ivoire, Monsieur Abdouraouf Gnon-Konde, Regional Director of UNHCR for West and Central Africa, and Mr. Tony Verheijen, World Bank Operation Manager for Côte d'Ivoire, Benin, Guinea, and Togo. Abdouraouf, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Madame le ministre de l'Économie, du Plan et du Développement, Madame la directrice du groupe Fragilité et Violence de la Banque mondiale, je veux aussi reconnaître la présence du conseiller spécial du secrétaire général des Nations Unies sur les questions de solutions dans le contexte de déplacements forcés, notamment les déplacements internes. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues, first allow me to acknowledge the significance of this third research conference on forced displacement and the unique opportunity it provides to bridge the gap between academic research and practical implementation. This event, the event of today, underscores the importance of turning research into tangible action that can enhance the lives of those affected by forced displacement. Second, I would like to highlight the unique role of the World Bank UNHCR Joint Data Center in advancing research that directly informs and enhances the quality of responses to forced displacement across the globe, but more particularly when it comes to West and Central Africa region. The Joint Data Center has become an instrumental player in gathering and utilizing data to drive impactful change. The bureau that I have the responsibility to cover has 21 countries, including specific situations like the Central Sahel, the Gulf of Guinea situation, the Lake Chad Basin, the Central African Republic situation, and of course, the Sudan situation that impact, as we know, at least in this region, it impacts Chad and Central African Republic. The scale of forced displacement in my region is staggering. The displaced population has doubled from 6.5 million in 2019 to almost 14 million in 2024. And our projection is that we may reach 15 million of forcibly displaced by December 2025. In the Sahel alone, we are seeing 5 million displaced today compared to 1.7 million in 2020. Coastal countries such as Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, Togo, Benin are not immune, with almost 150,000 individuals now registered as displaced. In Chad, particularly in the east part of Chad, the numbers are even more concerning. Chad has received 630,000 refugees, with almost 150,000 arriving in 2025 alone. And on this, I think it's good to remind ourselves that before the crisis broke in April 2023, Chad was already home for close to 420,000 refugees in the eastern part of the country. Madame la Directrice Soukeyna, you will remember we were there, I think last year with Anna Berger. So to receive all these refugees in the eastern part of Chad, 6 new settlements and expansion of the existing one have been achieved. But it's good to remind ourselves that today in eastern Chad, poverty rates among refugees and host communities exceed 70%, making the need for sustained support evident. While we are working with development actors and international financial institutions to implement the humanitarian development peace nexus and address long-term needs, it's crucial to remember that sustained humanitarian funding remains essential to meet immediate life-saving needs. And on that, I want to pause a little bit and thank AFDB because last year, when the crisis broke, AFDB put at the disposal of a UNDP, I think close to $30 million to see exactly how we can work the path toward more resilience for the hosts and the displaced. Forced displacement in the region is mainly driven by insecurity, violent attacks by non-state armed groups, and human rights violation. And in responding to such crises, whether through life-saving intervention or long-term solution, data is the cornerstone of effective humanitarian and development intervention. Without robust and accurate data, our responses risk being misaligned with the real need of the displaced population and the host. The Joint Data Center has been a champion of using academic research to gather this data, identifying the socio-economic condition of forcibly displaced persons, and using it to influence the design and implementation of targeted intervention. And I would like to share just a few examples of where data has driven impactful change. The integration of refugees into Chad national development programs, ensuring a more sustainable future for the hosts and the refugees. The inclusion of IDPs, the internally displaced person, in the CAR Central African Republic Poverty Assessment, which provide critical insight for targeted poverty reduction effort. These initiatives demonstrate how data can be operationalized to inform sustainable programming, but it's not enough to simply collect data. We must ensure that these data are used to shape policies and operations that are responsive to the evolving needs of the forced displaced population. And in this regard, I want to emphasize the pivotal role of the Joint Data Center in translating research into actionable strategies. For instance, the forced displacement survey conducted in Cameroon has provided vital data to inform both humanitarian and development response. In closing, let me say that it's crucial that we continue to prioritize the translation of academic research into actionable strategies. We must ensure that data we collect is not only comprehensive, but it is also put to effective use in shaping policies and programs that meet the need of the displaced population. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abdouraouf, for showing that how data can go a long way into supporting operations and also making an impact. I'd like to invite Tony on behalf of the World Bank Group in Abidjan to come and just say a full word of opening. Thank you, Tony.
Excellence, Madame la Ministre du Plan du Développement, de l'économie et du plan. Je vais parler en anglais après, mais quand même vous souhaiter la bienvenue et vous remercier pour votre présence. Monsieur le directeur régional de UNHCR, dear colleagues, dear representatives of international organizations, civil society, and the research community. It's a real pleasure for me today to be asked to say a few opening words at this important conference and event. Let me first extend my thanks to the government of Côte d'Ivoire, our host, for having agreed to host this event here today, and the remarkable partners that we work with throughout the world that have made this event possible. I'd also like to thank the colleagues from the World Bank UNHCR Joint Data Center on Forced Displacement for organizing the event here in Abidjan. Today's meeting brings me back to Kabul in August 2021, when I was the operations manager for Afghanistan, and we had to, in chaotic circumstances, evacuate our staff and dependents from there. The scenes that we saw and that I saw firsthand are with me today and show the real impact that crises and joint and forced displacement have on the lives of people throughout the world. This is one of the most harrowing periods that I've lived myself, and today's situation in Afghanistan is no better than it was in 2021. There might be less violence, but displacement is still a real issue, and it shows how important type of work that's being done by this center is. My current mandate in Côte d'Ivoire, we very often make our visits to the north of this country, and each time we go again, we see that the pressure of migration and forced displacement on communities in northern Côte d'Ivoire is growing. For sure, this is not the drama of Afghanistan of 2021, or the dramatic situation we're seeing in the Sahel that the director referred to. But it's important because it touches the lives of people every day. And when we listen to communities in the north of this country, and also in the north of the other countries that I represent, particularly Togo and Benin, we see how much pressure forced displacement brings on communities, and how much it impacts also those that are the displaced themselves. The importance that the World Bank attributes to this work is exemplified by the presence of two global directors from Washington with us today, Global Director Poverty and Global Director Fragility. I think this also is a testimony to how important we feel this work is today. Forced displacement is not just a humanitarian issue, but it's a development issue, and this is why the World Bank is particularly engaged in this work. Socioeconomic inclusion and stability, poverty reduction, access to services, governance, and building resilient country systems are core elements of addressing this problem. The World Bank, we're committed to address the root causes of displacement, supporting both displaced populations and their host communities. Our focus is on sustainable solutions through long-term development strategies, while leveraging strategic partnerships with humanitarian and other important stakeholders to deliver immediate relief and protection. Partnerships like the one presented here are crucial in this effort. As we engage in discussions over the next 2 days, let me make 3 points that we think are important for discussion as they should guide our actions. First, it is important and critical that we integrate displacement into development planning. Displacement is not a temporary issue. and Côte d'Ivoire is a critical example of this fact. It often extends across generations and its effects are long-lasting. Displaced populations must be included in national, regional and global development frameworks, whether in education, healthcare or job creation. They're integral to the socio-economic fabric to the countries where they reside. Second, supporting host communities is just as important as assisting displaced persons, in our view. Too often in responding to displacement, the international community focuses only and primarily on the immediate needs of refugees and IDPs, without sufficiently considering the pressures and demands being placed on host communities. The point I just made regarding the north of the 3 of the 4 countries that I represent today. These communities have to be supported through investments in infrastructure, education and jobs for both local and displaced populations. In this regard, one of the initiatives the World Bank has been proud to support is strengthening local economies through creating job opportunities for both host communities and internally and displaced persons. The COSO program, the Northern Côte d'Ivoire, Benin, Togo social cohesion program is one example of a way in which we're trying to address this, and we would like to do more of this in the future. We're discussing this in all countries in our country management unit. Finally, to echo the words of the regional director, we need data-driven policies and evidence-based solutions. Complexity of forced displacement requires evidence-based solutions that can adapt to evolving situations. Research, data collection, and the exchange of best practices are critical to understanding the long-term consequences of displacement on economic development, social cohesion, and political stability. This is why partnerships such as the one presented today between the World Bank and UNHCR and other institutions represented here are so important. In conclusion, let's just be reminded that forced displacement is not just a problem to be solved. It's a human experience that demands our collective empathy and action. Behind statistics and behind research are real lives, men, women, and children who've been uprooted, often through no fault of their own, and are seeking safety, stability, and opportunities for a better future. The next few days provide us with a critical window to align our thinking, strengthen our partnerships, and reinforce our commitment to creating policies that not only address the immediate needs of displaced, but also pave the way for long-term development and resilience. I'm confident that with the expertise and dedication of everyone in this room and online, we must leave this conference with actionable insights and renewed energy to tackle the multifaceted challenges of forced displacement. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak here today on behalf of the Country Management Unit and the World Bank, and look forward to the important work we can accomplish together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony, for reminding us that beyond the startling 117 million forcibly displaced, there's a story and livelihoods, and also working us through the strategic approach of the World Bank to continue supporting development aspect of the forcibly displaced without not losing sight of the immediateness. So now, je voudrais demander à Madame Kaba, Nialé, ministre de la Coopération internationale et du Plan de la Côte d'Ivoire, de bien vouloir nous aider à officiellement ouvrir cette conférence. Merci beaucoup, Madame la ministre.
Merci, Madame. Vous l'aurez compris, je vais parler en français, donc pour ceux qui veulent prendre leur micro, leur traduction. Madame la ministre Kane de la République de Centrafrique, Madame la directrice du groupe Fragilité et Violence de la Banque mondiale, Monsieur le directeur régional de la région Afrique de l'Ouest et du centre du HCR, Monsieur le conseiller spécial de la secrétaire générale de l'ONU, Monsieur le secrétaire général de l'ONU, Monsieur le directeur mondial du pôle pauvreté et équité de la Banque mondiale, Madame la directrice protection du UNHCR, Monsieur le directeur adjoint des opérations de la Banque mondiale, Monsieur le coordinateur en chef du Bureau de coordination des États en transition de la BAD, Madame la conseillère principale du Premier ministre de Libye, tout à l'heure, Monsieur le représentant du HCR en Côte d'Ivoire, Mesdames et Messieurs les éminents professeurs et experts, distingués invités, chers participants, Mesdames et Messieurs, tout protocole respecté. Je voudrais, au nom du Président de la République, Son Excellence M. Alassane Ouattara, du Premier ministre chef du gouvernement et à mon nom personnel, vous souhaiter la cordiale bienvenue à cette troisième conférence de recherche sur les déplacements forcés. Comme on dit chez nous, à Kaba, à toutes et à tous. J'adresse mes sincères remerciements aux organisateurs de la conférence pour avoir choisi donc Abidjan pour abriter cet important événement. Je salue également la présence distinguée de hauts dirigeants de la Banque mondiale, de la Banque africaine de développement, de UN Data Center sur les déplacements forcés, de l'African School of Economics, ainsi que les éminents professeurs du monde de la recherche qui prennent part à cette conférence. Cette conférence, la première du genre à être organisée sur le sol africain, après celle de 2020 au Danemark et de 2022 en mode virtuel, revêt, nous l'avons compris tous, une importance capitale. En effet, l'Afrique est le continent le plus affecté par les conflits et les effets du changement climatique qui contraignent les populations à se déplacer. La population vulnérable des déplacés s'établissait, nous dit-on, à environ 120 millions dans le monde en 2023, dont 40 millions, soit le tiers en Afrique, et plus de 14 millions en Afrique subsaharienne. Ce volume important de déplacés forcés pose des défis liés à la gestion et leur impact sur le développement socio-économique des pays d'accueil. La conférence d'Abidjan constitue à notre avis donc une tribune importante pour stimuler la production de données, la production de recherches quantitatives sur les déplacements forcés en offrant une plateforme d'échange entre les décideurs politiques, les chercheurs et les praticiens. Elle offre ainsi l'opportunité d'analyser l'importance de l'exploitation des données sur les déplacements forcés à des fins de pilotage des politiques publiques, ceci bien entendu dans le but d'améliorer durablement les conditions de vie des populations, donc à la fois les populations d'accueil, mais également les populations de déplacés. Distingués participants, mesdames et messieurs, le gouvernement ivoirien, conscient des enjeux majeurs liés à la donnée, notamment dans la réponse aux problématiques concernant les vulnérabilités, a entrepris des mesures visant à optimiser la production et l'exploitation des données pour mieux éclairer la prise de décision. Cela s'est traduit par la réforme de notre système statistique national, l'élaboration de documents cadres et stratégiques, ainsi que le renforcement du dispositif de suivi et d'évaluation des politiques publiques. Aujourd'hui, plus que jamais, la donnée est au centre de l'action publique et constitue un levier clé d'identification des besoins et des attentes des populations. C'est donc à juste titre que la Côte d'Ivoire a réalisé un certain nombre de travaux, notamment les travaux du changement d'année de base des comptes nationaux et de mise en œuvre du système de comptabilité nationale de 2008. Par ailleurs, de grandes opérations statistiques ont été réalisées, notamment le recensement général de la population de 2021, qui a permis de disposer de données géoréférencées pour mieux cibler les besoins et les dynamiques de population sur l'ensemble du territoire national. Mesdames et messieurs, distingués participants, pays de l'hospitalité, la Côte d'Ivoire a une longue tradition d'accueil des déplacés forcés. Le pays continue d'accueillir des personnes en quête de protection, notamment celles de la sous-région ouest africaine, fuyant les impacts des catastrophes naturelles et les violences perpétrées par des groupes armés. Selon le HCR, au 30 juin 2024, la Côte d'Ivoire accueillait 986 000 déplacés de force et apatrides, 931 000 apatrides et menacés d'apatridie et 53 201 demandeurs d'asile. En guise de réponse, le gouvernement a mis en place des politiques de gestion des flux de déplacés forcés. En effet, 2 centres d'accueil pour les réfugiés ont été créés pour accueillir les déplacés forcés sur la base du volontariat dans les régions du Togo et du Bunkani, zone frontalière au nord de la Côte d'Ivoire. Cette politique d'accueil requiert un effort budgétaire conséquent de la part de l'État ivoirien qui assure 90% du financement des 2 camps, une première en Afrique selon le HCR. Distingués participants, mesdames et messieurs, dans un contexte international marqué par la rareté des ressources, les politiques de gestion des déplacés forcés se heurtent aujourd'hui à plusieurs défis. Je voudrais en citer quelques-uns. La pression accrue sur l'accessibilité aux services sociaux de base, le coût élevé de la construction et de la gestion des centres d'accueil par l'État ivoirien, l'occupation des forêts classées et des sites d'orpaillage clandestins, la porosité des frontières, la traçabilité des déplacés, la collecte et l'analyse de données socio-économiques des déplacés, l'apatridie, etc. et j'en passe. Face à ces défis, la tenue de cette conférence à Abidjan suscite un espoir, une opportunité de renforcer la résilience et accélérer la dynamique de développement en Afrique de l'Ouest malgré les nombreux chocs exogènes. En effet, il est temps de mutualiser nos efforts en vue d'amplifier les résultats des différentes stratégies et actions en faveur de la gestion des réfugiés et des déplacés forcés. C'est pourquoi je voudrais inviter l'ensemble des participants ici à faire des contributions pertinentes aux activités qui meubleront ces 3 jours de rencontre afin d'accumuler les évidences et de partager les bonnes expériences. Au regard de la qualité et de la diversité des participants, je reste convaincu que les conclusions de cette conférence permettront de proposer des solutions innovantes à la problématique des statistiques et à la gestion efficace des déplacés forcés. En souhaitant plein succès à vos travaux, je déclare ouverte la 3e conférence de recherche sur les déplacements forcés. Je vous remercie pour votre attention.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Ministre. Merci beaucoup pour la Côte d'Ivoire qui continue d'être un pays hôte et malgré les tensions budgétaires qui continuent d'étendre cette générosité pour les milliers de personnes qui traversent la frontière pour venir trouver refuge au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire. Merci aussi de nous avoir rappelé tous les efforts que le pays est en train d'entreprendre en utilisant en faisant aussi profit des données évidence pour supporter les politiques publiques. Merci beaucoup. Nous savons que vous avez des contraintes de calendrier, donc merci d'avoir officiellement ouvert, on va vous libérer pour pouvoir continuer. On va, we'll let the minister leave, and then we'll take maybe 2 minutes, and I'll ask the panelists of the next section to please join me on the stage. Thank you.
I just moved the past. So sorry.
Dance floor as the music dies. There's no damn thing. You're sleeping. Moving on. Oh, it's easy to pretend. I know you're not a fool. Thanks for the chance that I've been given. Someone's never gonna dance again. When you got dancing. I know you're not a fool. You're no better than a cheap fan. It's a shame that I didn't you there. I'm gonna dance again. We got dance with you. Music seems so loud, I wish I even lose the crowd. Maybe it's better this way. We heard each other with the things we want to say. Could have been so good together. Could have been there forever. But now who's there with me? Please stay. I'm never gonna dance again. Guilty feet of God, no reason. So it's easy to pretend. I know you're not a fool. No better than a cheater man. A wasted chance that I think we missed. So I'm never gonna dance again the way I dance with you.
Hello. ¿Cómo está? Catherine. Hello, everyone. Sorry for the little delay. We're set for the first panel of this conference. I think we've heard from Abdouraouf, Tony, and Madame la Ministre of the relevant of forced displacement for the different for UNHCR, the efforts that the World Bank is doing and the strategic approach, but also what's the importance of data and evidence in independent public policies and some of the efforts that the Côte d'Ivoire implementing for the inclusion of the forcibly displaced. So now I think we're ready to start our next panel. We have Soukeyna Kane, who is the Global Director for Fragility and Violence for the World Bank, who's the institutional anchor for the Joint Data Center for the World Bank. We have Riadh Ben Messaoud, who's the lead transition in the African Development and Bank. And then we have online Leonard from the Professor Leonard. Is he online? Because I can't see him. Oh, hi Leonard, yes. He's a professor and Princeton and founder of the African School of Economics.
In other words,
I think
I love you.
Well, hi. Did we already put some of the little housekeeping for the people that are online? Then in terms of, so this panel, because we're running out of time, it was initially supposed to last for 70 minutes. I think we're just going to put this for 60 minutes. We have a couple of questions for each of our panelists today, and then by the end of it, we hopefully would have some time for some question either from the room or online. And then for online, we have a pigeonhole, and then we'll be conveying them to the different panelists that we have today. So without any further ado, we'll start with Soukeyna. Soukeyna, we've already had a gist from Tony on some of the strategic approach that the World Bank is doing. We know that forced displacement is increasingly becoming a global challenge. From your own perspective of Global Director of Fragility, and so could you please tell us what do you see as the most pressing issues, in particular in the context of West Africa from your different roles? And then what is the World Bank is doing to address these challenges? Thank you, Soukeyna. Over.
Thank you very much, Aisha. Good morning, good afternoon to all participants here. I'm delighted to be part of this conference. and to address this growing global challenge of forcibly displaced people. As Abdouraouf said, exactly 1 year ago, we joined our managing director, Anna Biorde, and the High Commissioner, Filippo Grandi, in Adre, in Chad, seeing the refugee situation from Sudan. And I think that's really a situation epitomized in a way the pressing challenges that we face. First, it's about compounding risk that create this influx of refugees, conflicts, violence, or human rights violation. Number two is that we're facing protracted situation because as we're seeing this influx of population coming from Sudan, we were still there. We still have people coming from Darfur. So we see that who have been there for decades now. So we see that this protracted situation lasts around 20 years. That's the average. So we're not talking about only a humanitarian situation. We're really talking about significant development situation. So what is the bank doing? The first thing is partnership. We cannot do it alone. And that's why I'm delighted to mention our partnership with UNHCR in this agenda as one of our successful partnership. It's a mission-driven partnership based on our comparative advantage that we have developed with UNHCR. UNHCR help us assess the refugee protection framework of countries. UNHCR helps us with identifying the needs, with developing programs that are helping assess and respond to this situation. So partnership is one. The second is about resources. We need to find resources to address these needs because, as you said, majority, more than 60% of the forcibly displaced people do live in low income countries who are already facing development needs. So we need to find additional resources to support these countries, and this is a global challenge. And so that's why through IDA, which is our financing arm for poor countries, we have a refugee window, refugee and host community window. And for IDA 20, we're able to identify to earmark $2.4 billion to support refugees and host communities. So, but in terms of the third element, I think is about programming, how we can help those resources really to support programs, projects that do attend to those needs. And we have a few examples in social protection, education, access to health for both refugees and host communities. The other element, important element, is about supporting policies, working with governments to help them develop policies that do welcome refugees. So what we hope is that by the end of IDA 20, around 60% of benefiting countries should be able to, or should implement policies that welcome refugees in their respective countries. And as we're speaking and we're seeing how those numbers by the day are increasing, the last but by no means least important element is data. Right? Because we realize that whether they're refugees or internal displaced people, they can be most of the time in the shadow of public policies. And I think the minister from Côte d'Ivoire has mentioned it. It's important that we have research, economic studies that allow governments to make sure that their public policies do take into account those population, vulnerable population. And I really would like to emphasize what my colleague Tony said, that behind the numbers, behind all the data and the research. We're talking about lives of people losing their lives, their livelihoods, and at times any perspective for their future. I remember last year when we were in Chad, we met, in addition to really seeing all those kids and their suffering, malnourished, being taken care of, we saw as well opportunities. I spoke with a woman who was a teacher in Sudan, educated, who was here and who could offer something to the hosting country. So we should as well look at this as an opportunity. And that's why as well, in terms of the response, working in a more sustainable programming, trying to find work with private sector, including with our private sector arm IFC, to find sustainable and jobs, sustainable livelihood, finding jobs, private sector solution for displaced people to us is as well significant. We have examples where it was achieved successfully in Kenya, for instance, but much more needs to be done. With that, let me pause here for the interest of time.
Thank you very much, Soukeyna, for sharing the experience across the region in terms of how the bank is doing to help these specific countries address this, and then how we're focusing on sustainable financing and to support the improvement of this life. And then thank you also for reminding us how we cannot do it all, and we should be relying on partnership like the Joint Data Center. And then with the fast increasing numbers of the forcibly displaced, the money that we have to be allowing to support these issues are not commensurate with that. So the need of us raising additional resources so that we can cater to the specific need of this group. Programming is important, and I think the data and evidence that JDC is also and other researchers that are in the room today are contributing towards supporting, ensuring that some of those policies are actually making an impact. So let me turn to Abdouraouf. I think Abdouraouf, you already gave us some little insight about what UNHCR is doing. What do you see first as the most binding issue? You told us about, the Gulf of Guinea, but also a little bit more what's happening in Chad. So if you could please tell us, what do you see from the UNHCR perspective? What are the most binding pressure that you see, and what is UNHCR is doing to help, address some of this?
No, Aisha, thanks for the question. I think you heard me in my opening remarks telling you how the numbers, are increasing. But one of the things that we didn't mention here was the effect of, climate change. I'm sure that most of you have seen what has happened these past weeks and months across, the sub-region, from Mali up to, Chad, where people were losing almost everything, which is, for me, a sort of paradox in a region where water is so badly needed. But at the same time, water is depriving people, from the livestock, from the livelihood. People are, are losing their life because of water. Last year, it was not the flood, but it was the drought. So meaning that these are additional strains, that affect displaced and communities. On top of it, maybe I didn't say it clearly when in my opening statement, but the main driver of displacement is insecurity, instability, governance issue. So unless we address those elements, people will continue, to be displaced. Then I told you that by 2025, at the end of 2025, we will have in this region alone 15 million displaced people. And maybe one of the things that I needed to point out is the fact that most of them are IDPs, but IDPs, internally displaced persons, Today are the refugees tomorrow, in case, we fail to provide, the response that they need. So, and Soukeyna mentioned something about the protected nature of the displacement. Average lifespan of displacement is 20-25 years. So how do you want to deal with a displacement that, that lasts for 25 years? It's a development challenge. But at the same time, if we want development actors or peace actors, to be part of this conversation, we need to make sure that we provide them as a humanitarian actors the data that they need. And we can't do it alone. Government need to be, to have leadership, to own, all these policies. So what kind of data can we put, in the center so that based on those evidences, we can nurture and strengthen the partnership? So the key main issue that we are confronted with is, lack of resources for the humanitarian, the need to embrace the opportunities with development actors, but make sure that we have the right great data that will inform the policies and intervention that will help us to move toward, a sort of cohesion, social cohesion. Without social cohesion, it will be very difficult, to continue to invest. Soukeyna was given the example of Chad. Let me just tell you that the town of Adre in the eastern part of Chad before the crisis was home for 40,000 individuals. Today in Adre, you have those 40,000 Chadians plus 300,000 Sudanese refugees. How do you deal with it? Let me stop here for the sense of time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Abdouraouf, for reminding us how intertwined are these and then the many challenges that the specific region entails, and then help us identify and look for how do we address the root causes of those forces. And with climate change being reality in the Sahel region, like you said, we're fluctuating again, recurrent and then and also of great magnitude. So we need to be also again joining forces, responsibility, supporting the states into dealing with this specific issue. And let me turn now to Riadh. Riadh as the development bank in the region. So what do you see? I know that the African Development Bank has really upped its game in terms of addressing the drivers of fragility and violence, but specifically on the forcibly displaced, that you, I think, assign yourself a mandate of gathering and then supporting and raising additional resources to be able to support those affected by forcibly displaced in the region, also in the country. But what do you see as the most urgent pressures that you see, and what specifically is the bank, the African Development Bank, doing to support countries in the region?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for this opportunity, Aisha, and the whole JDC team. And I'm a statistician by training, so I'm a strong believer on the power of data and how much data can really be a game changer in the way we operate as MDBs. You've heard from the Ministry of Economy from Côte d'Ivoire, the data you heard from Abdouraouf. The numbers are threatening. Africa alone, as of today, we are at 40 million. 40 million people displaced. 32 are internally displaced. 8 million refugees, including asylum seekers. That's too much. And definitely we cannot, ignore this issue. As an MDB, as a development actor, we need to integrate these considerations at the heart of, first, our understanding of the situation, and then how we translate that, how we translate research, data, analytics into operations. And Abdouraouf alluded to the insecurity as a main driver of forcibly displacement of population. We believe in the African Development Bank
that at the heart, at the root causes of insecurity and possibly forced displacement of population, the causes are anchored in socio-economic development aspects. We call it the disaster triangle, which bring together three factors: youth unemployment, extreme poverty, and last but not least, climate change and environmental degradation. Just think through it. These three factors together will lead to the radicalization of youth, will lead to the recruitment of extremist groups. And this is where we are today. Look at the Sahel. Sahel alone, as a region, 3.5 million displaced people. And in a situation like in the Central Sahara, in Burkina Faso, we cannot pretend doing business as usual as a development partner. And if you think through it also, I've been amazed when you discussing with some of my former colleagues. You know, if you look at the whole West region back to the 90s, when Côte d'Ivoire, Sierra Leone, and coastal countries were hotspots for conflict, for civil wars, for instability. At that time, countries like Burkina, like Chad, like Niger were considered as sweet spots for peace and stability. 30 years ago, look where we are. Look how much the situation has flipped. So this is our working environment. This is, as an African Development Bank, we have the responsibility to be responsive to these issues. Now, you're asking me what the bank is doing. You know, I'll share with you, I mean, this is not a joke. The bank was one of the multilateral institutions who suffered the most from the conflict effect. You know, we've been forced to displace our HQ from Abidjan to Tunis. So this is not a joke, but I believe that that was one unique institution experience that really triggered the institution to engage very serious reflections from that time on how the institution can integrate issues of conflict, post-conflict issues in its development business development. So the issue is, you know, and since 2004, the bank has created the post-conflict country facility, which was supported also by an assistance policy guidelines for post-conflict assistance. And since 2008, the bank established its first fragility strategy. I call it at that time enhanced engagement in fragile states. And then we switched from fragile states, and we thought that, you know, in 2014, we established the new strategy, the 2014 strategy for addressing fragility and building resilience. And as we speak, we are in the process of implementing, you know, the 2022 strategy, fragility strategy of the bank. And the issue of IDPs and forced displacement is at the heart of, you know, the operationalization of this strategy. I know the time is very short, but allow me just to give you very quick, you know, concrete examples of how we operate and how we translate, you know, these considerations into our strategic and operational engagement. You know, when you look at our TYS, the 10-year strategy of the African Development Bank, the previous and the current one, the issue of IDPs and refugees is captured very well in the results measurement framework of the strategy. So it means that this is one of the key targets that we aim to reduce in our strategy. And how we do this, we have what we call the fragility lens application. The fragility lens application means that in our strategic engagement with countries, we make sure that the likes of my colleague who's here, Linger and others, our fragility experts, are part of the team. They will go on the ground, they will inform, the discussion with the national government. They will be the one, through the analysis, the data that they would collect, they will inform that policy dialogue with the countries. And this way, the bank would be influential in the way it operates, in the way we do business. So for instance, in a context like in Burkina Faso, when we go and meet with the national government and tell them, hey guys, you have almost 10% of your population which is displaced. So please, then when you define your priorities, let's make sure that alongside infrastructure, sustainable infrastructure development and agricultural value chains, let's make sure that in every single priorities, we mainstream IDPs and refugees issues. Let's make sure in the pipeline of operations, these issues are factored in. How we translate now this in terms of operation, in terms of intervention. We do a lot of infrastructure. We used to do a lot of infrastructure and agriculture focused on hard infrastructure. But, the investment is not only about the road. It's not only about the asphalt. It's also about the hospital that you would rehabilitate alongside the road. It's also about the school. It's about the health sector. It's about the economic opportunity that you will unlock for refugees and host communities in the neighborhood of this big investment. That way, this is not only about a hard infrastructure investments, it's also an investment towards creating the conditions for peace and stability and for social cohesion between host communities and IDPs. So that's really the way that we operate. We try as much as we can through the mainstreaming of that fragility and resilience expertise in our operations. Now, I'll just for the sake of time, to get there, to be able to move the needles and, to be influential in strategies and operations, you need knowledge, you need research, you need accurate data. And this is where I think the bank has been doing quite a lot, in terms of fragility assessments, in terms of also creating tools, specific tools, data-driven tools to measure capacities and pressures at national, at regional level. We have the CRFA, we have many different other tools. But I think, and this is where the JDC, and I look forward for the bank to join also the initiative, because this is where I believe there is an opportunity for all of us through this analytical work to impact the connection and the interlinkage between security and forcibly displaced populations. And another point also, which is extremely important, I've been providing the example of the flip that we saw over the last 30 years in West Africa. The main lesson learned here, we need to be preventative. We should not wait for the crisis to happen, never again. And we see what is happening in the northern part of Benin, Togo, Ghana, and Côte d'Ivoire. And this is where I think the JDC would have really a central role to play, to be a driving force in order to create, this dynamic, and in order to help us as MDBs to be more preventative and more effective in our way to design projects, in our way to engage the dialogue with national authorities, in our way also to provide concrete solutions for IDPs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So those are Riadh. I saw Soukeyna nodding when you talked about prevention, no? Because she's been hammering about what should we be doing more on prevention. No, we've seen all what have happened in the Sahel, and then how, you know, the bank, the African Development Bank, and so also the World Bank are rethinking themselves to really try to see in such a dynamic, you know, environment. You talked about how things have changed overnight over less than 2 decades in the region, you know, with, you know, some host country becoming actually, you know, active conflict country with, you know, with its amount of the forcibly displaced. And then also how, you know, with all this, how could we be leveraging data and evidence to be supporting this preventive, but also continuing to working, you know, on a longer term development prospect. How do we support this country to build this, you know, their resilience? How do we also without losing sight on, you know, how do we also work with our humanitarian partners so that we can continue also catering to those you know, burning issues that are happening on the grounds. At the end of the day, we're talking about life and livelihoods. So one of the objectives of this conference is actually was to like, how do we help the researchers and the research that's being done really being operationalized? You've heard from the Ministry of Côte d'Ivoire, you've heard from, you know, MDBs, you've heard from, you know, UNHCR, in terms of, you know, how important, you know, data and evidence are in terms of making very impactful policies, no, and then programming, and then, you know, using the resources so that we make them work as hard as possible to be delivering great, you know, improvement of the lives of the forcibly displaced and their hosts. And here I'm turning to Leonard. You've heard all of those reflections, you know, both from the, you know, policymakers, but also the practitioners, and also UNHCR. From your point of view, how can research, you know, be supporting those efforts? No, if you could also point out to some examples of areas in which researchers and academics can actively contribute to improving the livelihood of those forcibly displaced, but also the community that hosts them. Leonard?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me, and also to get...
You're muted, I think. We cannot hear you in the room.
Oh, I'm not muted, but can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. All right, so I say thanks again for inviting me and to make African Solar Economics a partner for this. I'd like to make 3 points broadly. The first one is personal. In fact, 37 years ago, I was a refugee in Côte d'Ivoire, and actually I was living in Yopougon. And in fact, I came to Côte d'Ivoire because there was a threat to my life when I was in Nigeria, and the Red Cross took me to Côte d'Ivoire. And it's a wonderful, wonderful experience for me because the environment was very welcoming, and I have support from the government, the various programs. And fast forward, I left Côte d'Ivoire in 1987. In 1995, I was professor at Yale University. And what happened in Côte d'Ivoire explained what I became. So I think it's very important to see refugees not just as victims, but also as assets for international development. And so the second point that I would like to raise is, as you mentioned, the need for research and education. So in terms of, first of all, let me start with education. Education, I mean, this has been mentioned before, but I think what is very, very important is to upgrade the skills and the knowledge of the refugee population so that they can take care of themselves. You know, I'm saying this out of experience. You know, when I was in Côte d'Ivoire, I was high school. I have a high school degree, but I was so ready to move on that I went to Canada. I did not even take undergraduate education. I was fast forward to more or less a master's degree. So it just shows you not only the potential, but how education support for the refugee population can make a big difference. Now, research here will be, as the panelists have mentioned, of major importance to try to build security in regions of the displaced people. I'm one of those people who think, for instance, that Sahel is not completely lost. We need to think creatively about how we can move from where we are to where we need to be. Places, for instance, like Niger, like particularly Niger, maybe less Burkina Faso and Mali, things could have been much, much, much worse than they are. So why? What are the mechanisms, domestic mechanisms, traditional institutions, political institutions that help to get things not like what it is in Chad or Sudan? So I think a lot of research needs to be done to be able to think about what are the institutional fix that to the fragile situation that's happening. Now, besides that, I think it's also with data, identify, for instance, more or less like identify the refugee populations, for instance, more because, the refugees are, as I told you from my own experience, many of them are highly skilled, highly educated. They could be, as I mentioned earlier, massive assets as opposed to be just recipients of aid or whatever, And also, we also need to recognize how resilient they are, how determined they are. And this could also be an asset, not only for themselves, but also for the, for the host country and also for international organizations. So the third point I would like to make is the need to think not only in terms of resources, but in terms of institutional innovation. So what are we doing currently? I mean, let me put it this way. What can we do? What new institution, new organization, new initiatives that we can put in place to handle this crisis? I can think of the need to promote educated entrepreneurship among the refugee population. As I said, many of them, not only they are resilient, they're determined, they're entrepreneurial, but also many of them are highly educated. So how can we get them to, in fact, help us by become an entrepreneur, by developing entrepreneurial skills? So the second one I mentioned earlier, it will be education. I will see the need to partner with local universities, African School of Economics can be one of them, to develop programs that are targeted toward refugees. Like for instance, instead of getting them to study for 10 years, given their skills, there can be programs to fast track them to become, basically, so that they can take care of themselves and also they can make a contribution to the community where they are. So partnership with universities I think, for high-level education program are very important. I can see, for instance, the opportunity to connect, let me put it this way. I think I can see that it's possible to create pipeline program, for instance, for refugee program, for some of them to go to Oxford, Harvard, Princeton, so that they can in fact be who they are supposed to be. But because of the, because of the refugees, because of the political situation in their home country, they are forced to, to flee. So at African School of Economics, for instance, one of the projects that we are thinking about, for instance, is to create not only specific program targeting refugees and displaced people. For instance, in Nigeria, we are discussing this with the Ministry of Education. That's one. And another important point, for instance, particularly in West Africa, the need to create like public policy program, particularly public policy masters that have students from all over West Africa, you know, Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, Mauritania, Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire, Benin, Togo, so that we can develop a new class of policymakers for tomorrow, in a sense that build on, you know, serious knowledge and data, as you mentioned, you know, to bring a more cohesive West Africa, to avoid the split that exists currently between coastal countries and Sahel. You know, so I think we are thinking about creating this kind of program. We are working with several organizations to identify young students from all those places so that we can put them at the same place so that they can interact. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Again, as I said, it's personal for me, and I feel it's unfortunate that I was not able to make it directly to Abidjan, but I think it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Leonard, for sharing your inspiring stories. No, so, and I think you also made a very good point that I wanted to pick on, that also Soukeyna mentioned earlier, and the rest of the panel, which is, you know, refugees want to be self-reliant. Refugees are coming in there, some of them with, you know, skills that could contribute to the productivity in their host countries. No, so, and, you know, this goes a long way. I think at the JDC, we have done a lot of analysis in the, you know, Latin American region, where we saw, for example, the Venezuelan coming in with, you know, a big chunk of them with, you know, tertiary education that could really be contributing. And that could help offset, you know, some of the investment for access to the social services that the government would be making. And the same holds for Chad. No, the JDC is also supporting using the data that was collected by the national statistical offices, you know, come up with recommendations that allow, you know, looking at, you know, short-term measures, policy measures, you know, for those people that still need the emergency and humanitarian support, but also looking at for those people that have the capacity, the capabilities, and then can be contributing in their community, but also become self-reliant, that wheels. And those have helped, for example, programming in the World Bank that we retrofitted operation so that we could cater to those specific needs. And that also helped Chad in terms of when they had the influx to really better prepare the operation when we had that package of resources from the bank and, you know, some other partners in country. Just that goes a long way, that the, you know, the self-reliance is really, it's music to our ears into, you know, in terms of collecting data and then supporting those for the government to be implementing those policies. I think I'm not doing a great job into the moderation. We're kind of running out of time. So I'll just do the last round of questions for our different panelists. I think each of one of you has touched on, you know, how important partnership was, no? So we cannot do it all. And then, you know about the JDC, you know, it's an example of a well-functioning partnership between humanitarian and development. You all also mentioned how important it is to work across the nexus, you know, given the, you know, the poly-crisis, given that they intertwine. How are you leveraging partnership to advance your work on forced displacement from the perspective of, you know, the World Bank, UNHCR, and African Development Bank? And what are the key issues that you foresee into building successful partnership, but really for result and impact? So maybe this time I'm going to start with Riadh.
No, this is a very valuable question. Thank you for addressing it. You know, for us in the African Development Bank, partnership is really at the heart of our approach. And if you look at our latest strategy for addressing fragility and building resilience in Africa, we elevated intentionally partnership as a guiding principle for the strategy. That means that at the heart of our operational model, we integrate the HDP nexus, humanitarian, development, and peace building actors as part of, you know, our collective action. So I just, you know, since, I mean, the context is pretty much focused on West Africa, I can also give some other examples of successful partnership that we've been building. First of all, back to 2018, we've been very successful in working with ICRC, for instance, with the Red Cross, towards providing concrete solution for women economic empowerment in the region of the Sahel, in the likes of DIFA sub-region, in the, and these are sub-regions that have been affected actually by conflict, and the priority is primarily giving to IDPs, especially women and youth. And it goes along what the professor was saying. It's all about providing, training for development and the development of the skills of these populations in order to equip them with the appropriate, economic opportunities so they can create wealth. The other point also, the example of the Sahel. There is the Sahel Alliance, of course, we are part of it. Some members also in this room, they are part of the Sahel Alliance. But beyond the Sahel Alliance, we have been engaging internally with a new initiative, the Sahel Initiative. This is really a very focused initiative where through it, we try to find how we can do things differently, how we can innovate. In the context of the Sahel, add to the forced displacement of populations, add to the issue of constitutional changes, political instability. All these things make it a bit difficult also for us as an MDB to engage, So we need to find out entry points that will allow us to be able to reach to these, vulnerable population, to IDPs, to refugees. So even the entry points, somehow you really struggle to find them. So this is why we, under this initiative, we are developing a kind of handbook, a handbook for peace-positive engagement in the context of the Sahel. The handbook is all about providing advice, providing guidance, how as an MDB or as a development partner, it's not only about the African Development Bank, it's all about, it's about the whole international community who wants to engage in a peace-positive manner in this region. And the whole idea here, and that brings me to another guiding principle of our strategy, do no harm. And, doing no harm is good, but being intentional in doing good is better.
Yeah.
So what does it mean? It means we want to be intentional in creating and mainstreaming in our operations and our interventions, peace-positive component. As I said, it is not about the hard infrastructure, but it's also about the peace component of it. So in that, and this is, the paradigm that we are trying to build through this handbook guideline. We've been also engaging with the Liptako-Gorma Authority, because we believe also regional organizations like these ones have really a central role to play. They are on the ground. They have also, access to information, but also access to these, vulnerable communities, and they can help us find out, these, the appropriate entry points to be more effective. So we are supporting the Liptako-Gorma Authority for the implementation of their stabilization strategy. And it's all about taking care of host communities, refugees, and forced displaced population in the central Sahel. So this is also another example of, partnership that we are trying to build in the Sahel region and in West Africa. On the west coastal countries, so we are engaging also with the USAID. And in the context of, and I recognize my colleague Sarah here, who is from the USAID, in the context of the Fragility, the US Fragility Act, there's a very clear intentional focus on prevention. It's all about preventing, the spillover effect from the Sahel to West coastal countries and promoting stability in these countries. So we are trying to find out, how we can cooperate together and work together around a regional development objective agreement in the context of the Sahel with the USAID. So this is a 5 years cooperation co-financing agreement focusing on governance, on agriculture, on climate change, on water and sanitation and private sector development. Let me give you, if you allow me, another example beyond the Sahel. On speaking of peace positive engagement, we've been engaging a lot in the northern part of Mozambique. And since 2021, with the World Bank, also with the European Union and the UN, we've been conducting a peace building assessment, a recovery and peace building assessment. And that assessment helped us also to inform the government integrated Northern region development strategy. The same strategy, we use it now to promote a peace positive engagement. And as we speak, I'm happy to report that the bank is working now with Interpeace to put together the establishment of a peace and security hub in the context of Northern Mozambique. And the hub mission is all about creating, helping the government to mobilize resources and creating the condition for the local private sector to flourish. Some other examples also, we've been working very closely with my brother Abdouraouf in the context of CAR, Central African Republic, around the solution support platform. And this is also another example of a very, very successful partnership where the two of us, we are leading the charge and leading, a whole group of donors that seek to provide the financial and also the technical assistance to those countries, the signatory of the Yaoundé Declaration, who takes care of the refugees and the IDPs from Central African Republic. So this is a very pragmatic and very data-driven, but also action-driven partnership that we are leading with the UNHCR. Speaking to the UNHCR too, we have also, you mentioned the example of the crisis response we are providing with the UNDP in the context of CAR and Chad to address the issue of refugees from Sudan. But I'm happy also to report that as we speak, we are also appraising another operation with the UNHCR in the context of South Sudan to address the issue of IDPs, refugees, and returnees from Sudan to South Sudan. And it's all about, as the professor has said, it's about providing, the livelihood and job creation opportunity through upskilling and training to youth and women. So these, some of the examples of the concrete partnership that we are trying to build on the ground. Again, I think the data and the research is very important, and these will help us to be more effective, to inform in a more better and more pragmatic way how we can operate and how we can, create these partnerships on the ground. So with that, thank you so much.
Thank you so very much, Riadh. So the importance and then all of the efforts that's been deployed by the African Development Bank to build, strategic partnership, leveraging on the different competitive advantages to continue delivering, services, creating growth, to really importantly achieve scale, speed, and impact. We're operating in a very volatile environment that the region was, including the issues, related to forced displacement, and then how you, really leveraging and harnessing those partnerships to continue delivering for the forcibly displaced. Let me turn to Abdouraouf. Abdouraouf, you've talked a lot earlier about the Joint Data Center as a successful partnership that should be replicated and leveraging. So if you could also tell us about, some of the other partnership that that you have in the region to continue delivering on your critical mandate of, protecting those people that are in need of international protection. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Aisha. It's true that when it's come to UNHCR, we are very well known with the work that we do in emergency, sphere. There is a crisis, we will go and then, we try to respond, provide what we call the life-saving, emergency services. And let me just take the example of Chad. We are doing it, and I think we need to be proud of the quality of work that, we are doing there. But if you meet the displaced, if you meet the refugees, one thing that they will tell you is that, thanks a lot, you have saved our life. But what about helping us, for these new life opportunities? And this is where the challenge, lie. It's not easy. How do we make it happen? So partnership with AFDB, he mentioned it already. Partnership with the World Bank, as Soukeyna also alluded to that. And the other partnership that we are trying to expand is the partnership with IFC. We recently had, a workshop meeting in Dakar with your colleagues, from the World Bank, IFC, to see exactly how can we bring all these displaced people and map them and link them to the sector, the productive sector, opportunities. So this is also a new partnership that we are trying to harness in our way or attempt to transition from emergency response, moving toward much more strongly on solution, meaning resilience and self-reliance. Another type of partnership that I can also mention is a partnership with the communities themselves. I think the professor alluded to it. I mean, the communities are the one who know exactly, the conditions. They are also the one who know the solution. So they have a wealth of knowledge that, we can also tap into. So I think we shouldn't forget that. And then, of course, all of these will only work if we have the right regulatory frameworks in place, the right policies in place. So meaning the government ownership. So this is where we don't say it loudly. Data sometimes help us, as UNHCR, to engage in a sort of non-political advocacy with states. You heard the minister saying that the refugees coming from Burkina Faso have been hosted, in camp. But this is not what we want. We want them to be in communities. So we know that we still have a lot of work, to achieve that. But based on the data, predictive data, that will show that people are there to stay for quite a long time. And having them in the camp will not be a solution. But we need to be patient, using the evidence and pushing, toward that kind of, new policy. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Abdouraouf, telling us how important it is to, to be broadening the partnership base, but also, working with the communities itself in terms of the pursuit of solution. I think we're really running out of time, so I'm going to ask Soukeyna for the last word in terms of what's being done. Soukeyna, has the institutional anchoring of the Joint Data Center, but also so many other partnerships in terms of, help the bank deliver on this, FCV agenda. So I'll just give you the floor. And then by the way, is this also closing because we won't unfortunately have the time to do a Q&A session because we run a little bit out of it. Thank you. Soukeyna, no pressure.
No pressure indeed. Yes, let me try to, I think the first point in terms of partnership is to be very deliberate in terms of partnership being our way of operating. It's not partnership, ad hoc partnership, but if you look at the FCV strategy, partnership is one of the pillars of the strategy. Number two is to really identify the potential synergies, because we all come with different strengths, different areas, or a blind spot of areas of improvement. So how can we build on a synergy? And I think JDC is, to me, a very important example in the sense that thanks to donors, and I would like really to thank our donors here at JDC. We have Denmark, EU, and the US that have allowed us to come with humanitarian like agency like UNHCR and take those displaced people out of the shadow of public policies. So that's number 3 is as well looking at the different needs of displaced people. We spoke a lot about the region, which Africa region, which of course is a priority. But we have displaced people in so many other regions. So we have specific tools for different needs. I spoke about the IDA financing for the refugee and host communities. We have another tool that is the Global Concessional Fund, where we work as well with UNHCR, all other MDBs, addressing the needs of middle-income countries. And that's why we can support by providing, allowing those countries to give money for them to be able to access concessional funds. Because one country will say, why should I pay, IBRD terms on a global challenge, something not for my population? So we help them having concessional funds to be able to address the needs of refugees. We do it we have a successful program in Jordan, Lebanon, Ecuador, Costa Rica, and many more countries. So it's important really to look at the broad spectrum and try to address with the specific tools. And then one other element, and I will stop there given the pressure that we have on time, is really to have long-term view. It's not just about addressing the immediate need, but we really need more and more to look at the long term. We know that it's not going to be a 1 month or 1 year situation. It's going to be at least 20 year situation. How do we address those needs in a more sustainable manner? How can we have sustainable programming? So we'll continue to work on this issue, and I really welcome this opportunity of this conversation, bringing together researchers, academicians, practitioners, and policymakers together to see how we can better address the needs, because unfortunately, given how fragility, conflict, and violence are unfortunately on the rise, this issue of displaced people is going to continue. So we have to be able to learn from our lessons and up our game in order to address this growing global challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Soukeyna, and thank you everyone for your patience. As you can see, we have covered a lot of grounds. This, panel was supposed to help us set a scene. Some of these thematics we will be delving in more in the course of this, the 3 days. We expect the conversation to continue either through the presentation and the interactive question and answer, but also, over coffee breaks and so on. So